welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I am going to be test driving Yamaha's 1982 Maxim XJ1100. And I have been working on this bike. I've just rebuilt the forks, the brakes, I've replaced the rear suspension with some progressive units, and I've also serviced the engine, the transmission, and the rear of the bike. And I've just aired up the tires, aired up the front air suspension, made sure everything is set to spec, and it is ready to ride. So I'm going to bring the camera along and we'll go find out how this thing rides together. And you can see it goes down through, the trip computer goes down through all the systems that it checks. All the lights are off, which is great. Our upper warning light is also off, which is great. And she starts right up, sounds good. I am currently riding Yamaha's 1982 XJ1100, and this is my first filmed test drive on this bike. I did one initially, but it was really I had to be more focused. I knew that the brakes were almost completely ineffective when I did that test drive, and so I was just kind of getting a sense for the rest of the bike. But I've gone over everything. The brakes, I still need to bed in the brakes, and so I'll be slowing down and kind of getting them to seat into the rotors. But this bike, you know, the first thing I'm noticing is it is very comfortable. And these bikes, the XJ1100 and XS1100, were known for their big power that they made. They were the quickest bikes when they came out, and it's got a 16 valve, big 1100cc, 16 valve, 4-cylinder, and they're just a powerhouse motor. The motors themselves are really a good unit. One area where you can kind of tell that this was Yamaha's first big 4-cylinder powerhouse motorcycle, the transmission, it lacks the smoothness and refinement of, you know, a Honda or a Kawasaki or Suzuki. You know, this bike does shift up through the gears nicely. I haven't had to pop out of gear or anything like that. But when you put it in gear, it just doesn't do so necessarily with the same smoothness as the other bikes. It's a little bit notchy. The cornering on this bike feels nice. The rear tire is a little bit squared off. It's worn in the middle, and so, you know, and the front tire itself is also worn. So the handling would improve with brand new tires front and back, and I may yet do that. Yeah, the engine is very, very smooth. I am really not getting much vibration at all through the foot pegs or the seat or the handlebars. Very, very nice. It's a very smooth power plant. It seems to be set up for the exhaust that's currently on it. Everything seems like it's running like it should. It doesn't really have any flat spots. This bike has aftermarket exhaust. It's got kind of the downturned baloney cut exhaust. And it sounds nice. The front brake line in particular is only activating one caliper in the front, and it is a long run, and I'm sure that this brake line has not been replaced since 1982. I was reading over the manual last night, and it was a little bit laughable. It said that Yamaha recommends replacing the brake lines on the bike every 4 years. So, you know, I could certainly justify replacing that brake line since it's been more than 40 years here. And it's mushy. It doesn't really have a very direct feel, and I can still, even after bleeding out the system and new pads and everything, I can still basically squeeze the lever almost all the way to the handlebar and it really still doesn't give me a whole lot of stopping power. So that's something just for safety, I'm going to replace that with a Spiegler line. I'll have to just measure this line and, you know, make sure it's make sure I get the right length, and then just install the Spiegler line. That's going to really help the safety on this bike. The rear brake pedal activates one caliper in the front and the caliper in the back, and it's a little bit goofy to try to bleed everything out properly. I did the best I could yesterday, but I'm going to do a little bit more research on that, make sure I did it 100% correct. When I get on the rear brakes, they're there. It does slow the bike, but there's no authority still in the stopping power of this machine. And even though I'm running the front suspension at the max PSI, which is 17 PSI in the front, it still seems to dive quite a bit under braking, and I have a feeling that this suspension, unless I tweak it a little bit, is just going to be more mushy than I like. It is comfortable. It does ride nicely. I haven't really hit any sharp bumps yet, but it's certainly, this bike, even as it rides right this second, would be a fabulous place to spend the day. There's never been any smoke on startup when I started the bike. Even though I hadn't run this bike in a couple of weeks, when I started it up today, it fired within a turn of the starter motor. Just popped off right away. The fairing on this bike really does provide a nice envelope. I'm not getting a ton of turbulence at my head. I can see over the windshield, which is nice, and I'm getting, it's like the Goldilocks zone of the fairings. It's not so big that I'm trapped in a, you know, bubble of really hot air, but it's also not so small that it's ineffective. So it's kind of not too big, not too small, but just right. And I know it looks funkadelic, but I kind of like it. Instrumentation on this bike is clear. Everything looks nice on it. I would say, you know, the one thing that Suzuki just still has the advantage on is the gear indicator. And if John McGinnis has a gear indicator on his race bike, I don't want to hear any comments on how gear indicator is only for inexperienced riders. Well, today I've put about 100 miles on the XJ1100, and she's really running nice. The brakes are starting to bed in. Everything seems like it's functioning as it should. I will probably go ahead and think about a way to firm up the front suspension a little bit, either with progressive springs or just a spacer in the top of the fork tubes. And I'm also going to look and just double check my front brakes, make sure there's no air in the lines there. I'm going to double check the rear brakes as well and do the same thing there. She's just running really nice. It's a really windy day today, and this fairing has just been fantastic. It's keeping me out of the wind, but not so much that I'm getting overheated. I'm still getting a little bit of air around the sides of it. And it's just a comfortable, nice place to be. Love to ride upstate or something. It's just really, you know, that nice and that comfortable. And the handling isn't terrible. But I really think that with just a little bit of upgrade to the brakes and a little bit of upgrade to the front suspension, this thing is going to be really, really nice, really dialed in well. So I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, enjoy the ride.